G'day guys, my name is Christopher and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm trying out my Van Gogh watercolor pencils for the first time. I've used the Van Gogh coloring pencils before, but I've never gotten around to trying out these watercolor pencils. I find the consistency and use of both the watercolor pencils and the normal pencils are pretty similar, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I'm using them to create a new profile picture. And if you watched my Inktober tour for day 14, I created this piece for the prompt word clock. And it might have confused you or made you wonder why I was drawing myself instead of a clock, but I think that our lives are such a brief flash of time and we have so many defining moments that you can condense them down into moments that are like the significant moments in a clock face. And it might be a bit of a stretch for some of you, but perhaps because I've recently reached middle age, I'm aware that my time is ticking away and that my time is running out, and so I need to do the things that I want to do when I can do them still, or as best as I can try to achieve those goals as quickly as I can, because time is tick-tocking away for all of us, and none of us know how long we have left. But moving on to the actual art supplies themselves, instead of deep philosophical and intense stuff, the watercolor pencils you can see are being activated with water here, and I found that they were pretty smooth to lay on and worked beautifully on the first layer and even the second layer, but I found that after the third layer on this paper anyway, it was getting a bit trickier to use them. The paper that I'm using is the Strathmore mixed media paper, so it's not the best for using pencils with. From what what I've seen online and what I've read online and what I've learnt in the years, and I'm not an expert at color pencils, but what I've picked up over the years is that I would say hot press watercolor paper of a fine quality, something like the Arches paper, is probably the best to be using for pencil work, including watercolor pencil work. That said, this Strathmore mixed media paper is still doing pretty well, and I'm starting to build up some interesting tones and variation at this stage. I'm finding it a little bit tricky, partly because of my inexperience, and also that, this is my first time ever using these pencils, and I've not used this paper before, I don't think, with pencils either, as far as I can remember. So it's all a lot of firsts, and it's all a little bit tricky, and I make some rookie mistakes just from inexperience, like with my eye color there. It's far too vivid, far too green. I did always intend to darken it, but even still, I should have started with a far darker tone than I did start with. I don't have glowing eyes, I promise. I'm not the Hulk secretly. And I've also made my hair far too yellow as well. The nice thing about pencils is though that you can layer them, including watercolor pencils, and I am able to tone things down a little bit. But I find that there are two tricky things. One is, I think, to do with the paper, that once I reach a number of layers, I'm finding it tricky to add more. And the second one I think is more to do with the pencils, and that is I'm finding it hard to get really dark darks, even with the jet black, and I often try to avoid black, although for pencils I'll use it sometimes. But even with the black pencil, I'm finding it hard to get really rich, deep, dark colors. And I end up switching to normal color pencils for the last couple of layers to deepen the colors a little bit. But by that stage, I think I've burnished a little bit too much, or the paper is not really the kind of paper to accept it, or both. And I'm not an expert on this stuff, so it may be that the paper is at fault for all of this stuff, or it may be that the pencils are more at fault, or it could be a combination. But I suspect a lot of it has to do with the paper, because with the final layers and touches with the regular color pencils, I switch brands. and I start using some Caran d'Ache luminance pencils, which are the best quality that there is, and the Holbein color pencils. If you've ever had a chance to get your hands on Holbein pencils, they are amazing. From what I've learned, you can't buy them open stock easily outside of Japan. In Japan, where I used to live, you can find them very easily open stock and quite cheaply, around $1 or so US a pencil. Or in Japanese money, around 100 yen. But I found that many people talked about the Holbein pencils only being sold as sets outside of the US. I'm not sure. From what I know, that's the same for both the Van Gogh regular pencils and the Van Gogh watercolor pencils. In Japan, I was able to get them somewhere between Sanzen-en and Gosen-en, so around $30 to $50 US for the full set, which, gosh, I've forgotten how many there are. Let me check. Okay, I have 60 pencils in both sets. I'm not sure if that's the largest set that is available, but I'm pretty sure that that is the case. And from what I know, you can't buy them open stock and you can only buy the sets outside of Japan. I don't really recall seeing the individual pencils being sold in Japan open stock either, so maybe they're just always sold as sets. But they are lightfast and they are artist quality and they are good creamy pencils. They're softer than the Polychromos, and I just bought my very first Prismacolor pencils and they're a little bit harder than those. So I think that they're extremely good quality for the money, and of course, you know, having artist quality and highlight fastness ratings is fantastic as well. You can see, again, as I'm layering in the background here, the pencils blend really well and they layer very well. At first I use a vivid purple and some light blue, and then I go over with some darker indigo and black. I think this is the black here, and you'll see it doesn't really go that deep, at least on that paper, but it does. But overall, I'm not so happy with the blacks in this set, or the darker. Yeah, really just the black in this set. The other dark colours are quite lovely, I think, and the other colours layer very well. I would probably be advising that you get some other whites as well. It's a great white for blending and burnishing and layering, but if you actually want white highlights, the whites both in the watercolor set and the regular set aren't going to be anywhere near as good as, say, the Holbein soft white, which is maybe the best, strongest white that I've come across, or very closely sitting with the Caran d'Ache luminance white. It's also a fantastic white and easier for many people to get a hold of, even though it's quite expensive. You can see that I've managed to salvage the eyes to some degree by darkening them quite a bit, but I lose the highlights in that process, and I lose some of the interesting shading and definition that I would have hoped to have gotten. And I'm finishing off the portrait with just doing some edging work and also using my Holbein mineral spirits. I will check the name of that. Because the last couple of layers are just using regular color pencils, I can't just use water to mix it. It's the Holbein Melts. It's a color pencil blender or mineral spirits. But from what I know, it's also hard to get outside of Japan, and I know that many other people will use things like the Mona Lisa odorless mineral spirits. And you can get quite large quantities fairly cheaply off Amazon, I think, or Jerry's Artarama or other places. Solvents are pretty important for using color pencils if you're not going to always burnish. And so I've not only created this piece for my Inktober series and the prompt word of clock, and a reminder that time is precious and ticking away for all of us, but I've also switched over on my social media accounts my profile icon finally, and now you'll see my self-portrait there It's a little bit weird making a self-portrait, but you'll see that there, and it's updated with, of course, the channel name as well, aartadventure. So on that note, I would love if you could like and leave me a comment and tell me what you think about my portrait and how realistic it is or not. But I'm also more interested to know, have you ever created a self-portrait? Because I think it's such an interesting exercise to do, and the choices that you make are really fascinating to me. I used to think it's such a vain and strange process to do, but now I see how valuable the experience is. And of course, if you can nail the self-portrait, if you're going for realism, then I'm sure you can tackle any other person. If it seems like it's, you know, a representation of you, you're going to be able to represent anyone else. I think it's possibly the hardest to make a self-portrait of yourself compared to anyone else. And if you're new here, I would love if you could click the subscribe button. It's going to be left as a clickable link just at the end of this video. And that's it for today. I hope everyone in the US or anyone around the world that celebrates Thanksgiving has a wonderful holiday break. Take care. Bye-bye.